Sarah Marie Johnson was born and raised in Idaho, United States, in what appeared to be a stable and respectable family. Her parents, Diane and Alan Scott Johnson, were well-regarded members of their community, both professionally accomplished and socially active. Diane worked in administrative roles, while Alan held a managerial position at a regional company. The household, by all outward appearances, seemed ordinary and secure. But like many families, it contained underlying tensions. Sarah, as a teenager, displayed intelligence and maturity beyond her years. But she also exhibited a headstrong nature and a strong sense of independence. These traits sometimes clashed with her parents' expectations and disciplinary style, creating a subtle but persistent friction. As she navigated school, social interactions, and personal growth, her relationship with her parents became increasingly strained, particularly in matters concerning her personal choices and social life. A significant source of conflict emerged when Sarah began a romantic relationship with a 19-year-old young man. Her parents disapproved of the relationship, citing the age difference and potential negative influence. Diane and Alan attempted to curtail her contact with him, monitoring her movements and restricting her freedoms, which only intensified Sarah's resentment. For a 16-year-old, these restrictions felt oppressive, and the tension escalated over time. Friends and neighbors later described her as alternating between outwardly compliant behavior and private frustration, suggesting an internal struggle with authority, personal desire, and teenage impulsivity. The combination of these pressures created a volatile environment within the household, though few could have anticipated the tragedy that would unfold. On September 2nd, 2003, the unimaginable occurred. Diane and Alan Scott Johnson were found dead in their Bellevue home, victims of a violent and deliberate attack. Both parents had been shot, with ballistic evidence confirming the use of a high-powered rifle. The manner of the shootings suggested careful planning and execution, with Diane found in her bedroom and Alan in another part of the home. The crime scene conveyed a shocking level of precision and control, and the community was stunned by the brutality. In a small town where neighbors were familiar with the family, the idea that a 16-year-old could be responsible for such violence was nearly inconceivable. Local law enforcement immediately began an intensive investigation to determine who could have committed such a heinous act. Early in the investigation, suspicion soon fell upon Sarah. Investigators examined access to the murder weapon and discovered that she had both knowledge of and access to the rifle used in the shootings. Her statements during initial questioning contained inconsistencies, raising further doubts in the eyes of law enforcement. The discovery of a possible motive, her parents' disapproval of her relationship, added to the suspicion. Investigators reconstructed timelines, examined phone records, and interviewed friends and neighbors to build a comprehensive understanding of Sarah's movements leading up to the crime. Although circumstantial, the evidence began to form a picture that suggested premeditation, and law enforcement pursued Sarah as the primary suspect. During the trial, the prosecution's theory centered on Sarah's desire to remove obstacles to her personal freedom and romantic relationship. They argued that her resentment toward her parents, combined with the perceived restrictions imposed upon her, culminated in a calculated decision to murder them. The prosecution presented detailed physical evidence, including ballistics analysis linking the rifle to the deaths, and highlighted inconsistencies in Sarah's account of her actions. Testimonies from friends and neighbors were used to illustrate her dissatisfaction with parental authority and her increasingly rebellious behavior. The prosecution painted a narrative of a teenager consumed by anger, seeking independence at any cost, and willing to commit extreme acts to achieve it. This narrative was bolstered by the calculated nature of the shootings, which suggested forethought rather than impulsivity. The defense, however, sought to challenge the prosecution's claims. They questioned the reliability of the evidence presented, particularly the circumstantial elements, and emphasized the lack of direct eyewitness testimony, placing Sarah at the crime scene during the shootings. Her attorneys argued that while she may have experienced tension with her parents, this alone did not prove she was capable of murder. The defense also explored alternative explanations for the events, suggesting that other individuals with potential access to the household could have been involved. Despite these efforts, the emotionally charged nature of the trial and the meticulous framing by the prosecution created a strong impression on the jury that Sarah had orchestrated the murders. After deliberation, the jury found Sarah Marie Johnson guilty of first-degree murder for both deaths. The sentencing reflected the severity of the crimes: 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, along with firearm enhancements. The verdict and sentence shocked the local community, as well as broader observers who were grappling with the fact that a 16-year-old could be deemed capable of committing such deliberate and violent acts. Public opinion was sharply divided, with some seeing the decision as necessary justice for a horrendous crime, while others questioned the appropriateness of the sentence for a minor. The case became a focal point in discussions about juvenile criminal responsibility and the ethics of sentencing children as adults. Following the conviction, Sarah's legal team pursued appeals, raising several important issues. They argued that her constitutional rights had been compromised and questioned whether the severity of her sentence was appropriate given her age at the time of the crime. The Idaho Supreme Court reviewed the case and ultimately upheld the convictions, affirming the jury's decision and maintaining her life sentences without parole. The appeals highlighted the broader debate about how the justice system treats juvenile offenders, especially in cases involving violent crimes. Advocates for juvenile justice argued that sentencing minors to life imprisonment without parole undermines opportunities for rehabilitation and ignores the developmental differences between adolescents and adults. The case of Sarah Marie Johnson also raised social and psychological questions. It served as a stark illustration of the potential consequences of extreme family conflict and unchecked teenage rebellion. Experts in adolescent psychology and family studies have analyzed the case to understand the intersection of personality development, parental control, and risky decision-making in teenagers. The tragedy underscores the importance of communication, monitoring, and support within families, particularly during periods of adolescence. It also highlights how interpersonal conflicts, if left unresolved, can escalate into catastrophic outcomes when combined with impulsive tendencies and access to lethal means. Moreover, the Johnson case continues to inform debates about juvenile justice policy and the appropriateness of sentencing practices. Scholars, legal professionals, and policymakers often reference it when discussing the balance between protecting society and providing rehabilitation opportunities for minors. The case illustrates the ethical and practical challenges faced by the legal system in determining culpability and punishment for adolescents who commit violent acts. It demonstrates that the intersection of family dynamics, social pressures, and individual choices can have irreversible consequences, leaving communities, legal institutions, and families grappling with profound moral and procedural questions. In conclusion, the Sarah Marie Johnson case is a tragic and complex story of adolescent rebellion, family conflict, and criminal responsibility. A teenage girl's choices led to the deaths of 2 devoted parents, creating a profound ripple effect across her family and community. The legal proceedings, from investigation to trial, conviction, and appeals, reflect both the challenges of applying the law to minors and the difficulty of interpreting human behavior in extreme circumstances. The case remains a significant reference point in discussions of juvenile crime, parental authority, and legal ethics. Its enduring relevance serves as a cautionary tale, emphasizing the importance of early intervention, mental health support, and understanding the developmental capacities of young offenders. Through this lens, the story of Sarah Marie Johnson continues to offer critical lessons for law enforcement, educators, mental health professionals, and families about the consequences of unchecked conflict, impulsivity, and tragedy. Noura Jackson was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, into a family that, from an outside perspective, seemed ordinary. Her father, Jim Jackson, passed away under unclear circumstances in 2004, leaving Noura and her mother, Jennifer Jackson, as the remaining immediate family. Jennifer was a respected investment banker and active in her community, known for her professionalism and dedication to family and work. Noura grew up in a household that appeared stable, but like many families, it contained complexities and tensions, particularly during her transition into adulthood. At 18, she was navigating school, social life, and personal relationships. And though she had the typical struggles of a young adult, nothing in her early life suggested the tragic events that would soon unfold. The case of Noura Jackson later drew significant attention due to its unusual combination of family tragedy, circumstantial evidence, and legal controversy, becoming a focal point for discussions on justice, fairness, and prosecutorial conduct. On the night of June 5, 2005, Jennifer Jackson was found brutally stabbed to death in her East Memphis home. The crime scene revealed an extraordinary level of violence, with more than 50 stab wounds recorded by investigators, indicating a deeply personal and frenzied attack. The local community was shocked by the brutality and horror of the incident, as Jennifer had been a well-known and respected figure. Law enforcement immediately began a thorough investigation, but initial evidence raised more questions than answers. Noura, the only immediate family member living in the household, soon became a person of interest. Investigators noted inconsistencies in her statements regarding her whereabouts on the night of the murder, which, combined with her status as the sole heir to her mother's estate, prompted suspicion. Additionally, witness statements and partial timelines were scrutinized to establish whether Noura could have been involved, though forensic evidence introduced complications by revealing DNA from 2 or 3 unidentified individuals at the crime scene. As the investigation progressed, the role of forensic evidence became central to the legal narrative. The DNA findings, while inconclusive in directly linking Noura to the murder, raised questions about whether other individuals may have been involved. Despite this, prosecutors focused on Noura, arguing that her relationship with her mother was strained and that she had a potential financial motive. They highlighted her lifestyle, social behavior, and alleged inconsistencies in her statements to construct a circumstantial case. Critics later noted that the heavy reliance on motive and character assessments, rather than direct forensic proof, represented a significant imbalance in the prosecution's approach. Noura's defense team emphasized these gaps, arguing that the unidentified DNA suggested the presence of other possible suspects, and that no concrete evidence directly implicated her in the crime. In 2009, Noura Jackson went to trial facing charges of second-degree murder. The prosecution presented its case with a focus on motive, portraying Noura as a troubled young woman who acted out of resentment and self-interest. Witnesses testified about her lifestyle, her behavior before and after her mother's death, and her relationship with her mother. The defense sought to counter these claims by emphasizing the absence of direct evidence, linking Noura to the murder scene, and highlighting the DNA findings that suggested other individuals could have been involved. Courtroom dynamics were highly charged, and the media closely followed the proceedings, often emphasizing the dramatic elements of the case rather than the evidentiary details. Ultimately, the jury found Noura guilty, and she was sentenced to 20 years and 9 months in prison, a verdict that sparked debate over the fairness of convictions based predominantly on circumstantial evidence. Following her conviction, Noura's legal team pursued a series of appeals. Central to these appeals were allegations of prosecutorial misconduct, including the withholding of evidence that could have supported her defense and improper comments made during the trial regarding her decision not to testify. These issues highlighted broader concerns about fairness in the legal process and the responsibilities of prosecutors to ensure that a defendant's rights are fully protected. The Tennessee Supreme Court reviewed the case and ultimately overturned Noura's conviction. Citing these procedural errors, the decision vacated the previous verdict and allowed Noura an opportunity for retrial. Though the case had already drawn significant public attention and support from advocacy organizations, including the Innocence Project, which emphasized the importance of impartial justice and the risks of wrongful convictions. In 2015, rather than face a retrial, Noura entered a plea agreement and pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. This legal resolution resulted in her immediate release, as she had already served nearly a decade in prison. The case generated discussion about the intersection of legal technicalities, circumstantial evidence, and public perception, illustrating the challenges faced by the justice system when handling complex and emotionally charged cases. Noura's release did not erase the years she spent in incarceration, nor did it fully resolve questions about the events surrounding her mother's death, leaving lingering debate among observers regarding her culpability and the fairness of the legal process. The Noura Jackson case holds broader significance for both the legal community and the public at large. It demonstrates the potential consequences of over-reliance on circumstantial evidence and highlights the importance of prosecutorial accountability. The case also underscores the risks associated with tunnel vision in criminal investigations, where investigators and prosecutors focus narrowly on one suspect while other possibilities are overlooked. From a societal perspective, the case serves as a cautionary tale about how legal outcomes can be influenced by character assessments, incomplete evidence, and procedural missteps, rather than purely by the facts of the crime. For students of law, criminology, and ethics, the case provides a valuable example of the intersection between legal theory and practical challenges in ensuring justice. Furthermore, the story of Noura Jackson illustrates the human toll of the legal process. She lost her mother in a violent and tragic manner, spent her early adult years in prison, and endured the emotional weight of public scrutiny and criminal accusations. Her case continues to be referenced in discussions of wrongful convictions, the importance of DNA and forensic evidence, and the ethical responsibilities of prosecutors and law enforcement officials. Beyond the legal implications, the case reminds society of the complex dynamics that can exist within families, the unpredictable nature of human behavior, and the profound consequences that can arise from a combination of personal conflict, investigative decisions, and judicial outcomes. In conclusion, the case of Noura Jackson is a complex narrative of tragedy, legal controversy, and societal reflection. From the brutal murder of her mother to her subsequent conviction, appeal, and eventual release, the events highlight the difficulties of navigating justice in situations marked by circumstantial evidence and procedural missteps. The case continues to serve as a reference point in legal studies, providing insight into the dangers of prosecutorial overreach, the necessity of rigorous evidence evaluation, and the importance of upholding the rights of defendants. Beyond its legal dimensions, the story remains a poignant reminder of personal loss, resilience, and the enduring need for fairness and transparency in the justice system. Isabella Guzman was born and raised in Aurora, Colorado, in a household that, on the surface, seemed like any other suburban family. But beneath this appearance, there were significant tensions and conflicts. Her relationship with her mother, Yun Mi Hoi, was fraught with constant arguments and emotional strain. From an early age, Isabella demonstrated behaviors that, while sometimes typical for adolescents, occasionally raised concerns among family and friends. As she entered her teenage years, these conflicts became more pronounced, and her interactions with her mother were often characterized by verbal confrontations, emotional withdrawal, and moments of defiance. Neighbors and acquaintances noted that the household atmosphere was tense, and disputes between Isabella and her mother were frequent, highlighting a volatile family dynamic. These early behavioral patterns, combined with the challenges of adolescence, set the stage for the tragic events that would later unfold. During her teenage years, Isabella's behavioral changes became increasingly noticeable. She exhibited emotional instability, periods of withdrawal, and apparent preoccupation with her own thoughts and feelings. Friends described her as at times detached from social interactions, while at other times she appeared unusually irritable or anxious. Observers later identified these behaviors as potential indicators of underlying mental health issues, though at the time, they were often dismissed as typical teenage moodiness. The ongoing friction between Isabella and her mother compounded these issues, creating an environment where conflicts escalated and emotional regulation was compromised. These dynamics, while difficult to understand fully from the outside, contributed to a situation in which tensions within the household were heightened and the risk of extreme outcomes increased. On August 28, 2013, the situation culminated in a tragic and violent event. Isabella stabbed her mother over 70 times, inflicting fatal injuries that would ultimately take Yun Mi Hoi's life. The crime was discovered by her stepfather, who immediately contacted emergency services. The scene of the crime was chaotic and brutal, reflecting the intensity of the attack and the depth of personal animosity involved. Law enforcement quickly responded, securing the scene, gathering forensic evidence, and conducting interviews with neighbors and acquaintances to reconstruct the timeline of events. Witnesses reported seeing Isabella acting strangely in the period leading up to the incident, with unusual behaviors and expressions that suggested emotional disturbance. Her arrest followed soon after, during which she displayed a calm and composed demeanor, a reaction that both alarmed and puzzled investigators and the public. Forensic analysis confirmed her direct involvement, with evidence clearly linking her to the stabbing and corroborating the accounts of witnesses and first responders. Once in custody, Isabella faced the charge of first-degree murder. However, her defense immediately pursued a strategy based on her mental health status, entering a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Court-ordered psychiatric evaluations revealed that Isabella was suffering from schizophrenia and other significant mental health conditions. Experts testified to the presence of delusions, auditory hallucinations, and severe disruptions in her perception of reality. These findings were critical in shaping the course of the trial, as the defense argued that her psychological state prevented her from forming the intent necessary to commit the crime, knowingly and willfully. Throughout the proceedings, her behavior, expressions, and composure drew attention from both the media and the courtroom audience, contributing to the case's notoriety and emphasizing the complex intersection of mental health and criminal accountability. The trial ultimately resulted in a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. Isabella was placed in the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo, where she entered a structured treatment program designed to address her psychiatric needs while maintaining safety protocols. Her life in the institution involved medication management, psychotherapy, and closely supervised reintegration efforts. Over time, reports indicated gradual improvements in her mental stability, though strict monitoring remained essential due to the severity of her previous actions. As part of her ongoing treatment plan, Isabella was allowed limited supervised releases for specific activities, balancing rehabilitation with the need to ensure public safety. Her status continued to attract media and public attention, prompting discussions about the treatment of mentally ill offenders and the ethical responsibilities of mental health institutions and the justice system. The broader implications of Isabella Guzman's case extend into multiple domains, including criminal justice, mental health law, and public policy. The case highlights the challenges of distinguishing between criminal intent and mental incapacity, emphasizing that not all acts of violence are the result of deliberate and rational planning. It underscores the importance of thorough psychiatric evaluation and the integration of mental health considerations into legal proceedings. Additionally, the case raises ethical debates concerning the rights of patients, public safety concerns, and the long-term management of individuals diagnosed with severe psychiatric disorders. The tragedy also illuminates the profound consequences of untreated or poorly managed mental illness, particularly within the context of family dynamics. For scholars, legal professionals, and mental health practitioners, the Isabella Guzman case serves as a critical reference point in understanding the complexities of the insanity defense, the balance between rehabilitation and societal protection, and the role of psychiatric assessment in ensuring just outcomes. Furthermore, the case serves as a stark reminder of the human toll that severe mental illness can have on families and communities. A mother lost her life in a violent and shocking manner. A young woman's life was dramatically altered. And the family, neighbors, and wider public were left grappling with questions about culpability, justice, and societal responsibility. The case illustrates how extreme psychological disturbances can manifest in dangerous behaviors and demonstrates the necessity of early intervention, comprehensive mental health care, and supportive social structures. Legal and psychiatric professionals have cited the case extensively when examining protocols for managing violent patients and evaluating the appropriateness of institutionalization versus community-based treatment. It remains a case study for balancing ethical concerns, treatment imperatives, and safety obligations in situations involving mentally ill offenders. In conclusion, the Isabella Guzman case is a complex and tragic intersection of mental illness, criminal justice, and family conflict. From the violent murder of her mother to her subsequent trial, verdict, and institutionalization, the events illustrate the profound challenges of adjudicating cases where psychiatric disorders are central to the behavior in question. The case remains highly relevant for legal scholars, mental health professionals, and policymakers, providing lessons on the application of the insanity defense, the management of mentally ill offenders, and the societal responsibilities toward both victims and patients. It underscores the necessity of integrating psychiatric expertise into legal proceedings, while also reflecting on the devastating personal and social consequences of untreated mental illness. Through careful examination, the story of Isabella Guzman continues to inform discussions on law, ethics, mental health, and public safety, serving as a cautionary yet instructive example for multiple fields of study.